Let's talk about Venezuela. Not because, to be honest, I care about Venezuela all that much, but we have the story from the New York Times. Street clashes turn deadly as Venezuela's power struggle deepens. The fatal violence comes as both President Nicolas Maduro and the opposition claim victory in the presidential election. More protests were taking place on Tuesday. What is this, a CVS receipt they're holding up?
Maybe that's the cost of groceries. I'm not trying to actually be funny. That looks
probably the election tab, to be completely honest, but it's just so long, I had to assume. At least 16 people, including a soldier, have died, and about 750 more arrested as a result of protests in Venezuela. Election officials declared the nation's autocratic leader Maduro the winner of another 6-year term early Monday, saying he handily beat former diplomat Edmundo Gonzalez. But the government, what didn't you say it was Maria the other day?
I did. The opposition leader, they said, was Maria in the Al Jazeera thing.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's the opposition leader, but I thought it was Gonzalez. Yeah. But the government has not released the full results, and many countries, including the U.S., have said the vote was marred by widespread irregularities. So what we're seeing now is, I don't know if I have any tweets pulled up for this one. Oh, yeah, take a look at this. This is from Visegrad. The streets of Caracas packed to the brim with protesters out to support opposition leader Maria Corina Machado. Yeah, that's what you said. During her first major speech since the election. Interesting. Ooh. I never know if these things are real, though.
It could be 3 years ago.
Right. And what is the date on this one? They say it's from today, but Alerta Mundial. It says, the streets of Venezuela overflow to protest against Nicolas Maduro's fraud. So what I see here and why I find it interesting is that there's been some articles written about civil war. I think it was like Rolling Stone wrote one. A bunch of them are writing, and you know what? I should probably pull this up because I think people should, it was Rolling Stone, and I think people should see what they're talking about. Not that I'm saying it's all, true and correct or whatever. Let's see if we can get this article pulled up.
Also, after that, pull up the BBC article from 2012 when Venezuela bans private gun ownership, if anybody wants to see what's coming to America under Kamala Harris.
So take a look at Rolling Stone, and here's a quote. This is from, where they say this is George, let's see, Ohio State Senator George Lang was warming up the crowd ahead of a speech from J.D. Vance. Quote, I'm afraid if we lose this one, it's going to take a civil war to save the country, and it will be saved. It's the greatest experiment in the history of mankind, and if we come down to a civil war, I'm glad we got people like Bikers for Trump on our side. There's a ... so who knows what he actually said. He later wrote that he regretted the mark, which was made in the excitement of the moment on stage. They go through many different people on the right who have talked about whether we're at war or whether there's a civil war. So the reason I think Venezuela is interesting is what happens when there is, indeterminate election. Or at the very least, the way to describe it is no one accepts the result of an election. We're not Venezuela. Venezuela is much, much smaller than the U.S., and we have hyperpolarization and geographic polarization. As I was saying yesterday, there's no way anybody in West Virginia is going to be like, well, I wanted Trump, so I'm going to go drive to New York or D.C. or Philly. They're going to stay where they are, in which case, why would you see clashes?
Right.
However, that being said, you can take a look at what happens. I'm actually thinking that what's happening in Venezuela is more likely to happen if Trump does win. If Trump wins, then liberals in major cities go nuts and riot and smash, tear down posters and lose their minds.
You remember the failed coup, Operation Gideon in 2020 with Venezuela? And then we had the private missionary firm from here,
right.
Canada, became an American citizen, and it failed when they hit land. And then that's another one of those things where you don't know what's real or not, because Maduro said it was the CIA, and then his opposition said
he's lying.
Maduro. Right, and it looked like it could be him lying to make it just kind of like a Venezuelan Northwoods.
You look at the failure that is Venezuela, and it's funny when the leftists are like, that's because the CIA is doing it to them. It's like, shut up, dude.
It's like everyone knows the CIA does that stuff, so I think Maduro is like, well, we're going to frame America.
But the idea that I was in Venezuela 10 years ago, and I can tell you that everything they try to do doesn't make any sense. The story I use to exemplify this is trying to buy a cell phone. Because they mandate jobs, because jobs are what give people access to currency, it took like 5 to 6 people to buy a cell phone. Whereas in America, you walk into a T-Mobile and you walk up to one guy and say, I want to get that phone. And they go, okay. And they pull up their tablet and they start swiping. And can I get your ID? And then here's the phone. And then, okay, you swipe here and then we'll fill this out. And it takes like 15 minutes. You sign it. One guy, you're done. in Venezuela, you go to one guy and say, I'd like to buy a cell phone. He says, okay, fill out this form. Okay, now you have to go to cell phone acquisition. So that's upstairs and around the corner. Then you go to cell phone acquisition and say, here's a list of phones you can buy, and say, okay, I want this one. He goes, okay, here's your ticket for that phone. Now you're going to go to warehouse retrievals. And then you walk over to one guy and he goes, there's your ticket, thank you. And he walks in the back, he finds the phone, he brings it back out. He says, okay, now you're going to go to, to purchasing. Then you walk over, and I'm just like, why? And the guy I was with, who was Venezuelan, was like, the government mandates the creation of jobs. So they require all of these companies to have as many jobs as possible, and it doesn't work. It drains the economy. It fails. So this is what Venezuela is. So when you see like this coup stuff and they're like, it's not Maduro. Maduro was on camera giving a speech to his country and he grabs an empanada out of his drawer and eats it. This dude is not competent.
Right.
But anyway, I digress.
You made an interesting point as to where we're most likely to see violence, and it would most certainly be if Trump wins, because you go back to the Summer of Love where you have a convicted felon who likely died of at least drug-contributing overdose, George Floyd, and a summer of riots. You have Donald Trump nearly assassinated live on TV. There wasn't one window broken. Imagine what there would have been had such a thing occurred to Joe Biden. So, 1,000% right. I was also just looking up the crime rate in Venezuela, given their gun laws, and I just found an article from Bloomberg talking about how the crime rates actually dropped because of Venezuelan migration. So that's also...
Yeah, but where are they going?
The issue to consider is that what we are seeing in Venezuela against Maduro is it's the people against the socialists, but it's the people in the cities. In the United States, people in red rural areas are not going to go out and like as you mentioned, someone tried to kill Trump, not a broken window. When Trump wins, the people will behave like this. They're going to attack their own cities. They're going to riot. There's going to be mass unrest. And then the question is, does it get bad enough to where it could actually destabilize things at a national level? I'm not so sure, because each state is effectively one Venezuela. They have to deal with their own internals. Trump could very well just be like, good luck. Your riots in your cities have nothing to do with the federal government, and you have no ability to overturn or change anything at the federal government level. Have a nice day.
Well, Trump supporters certainly aren't going to go rally on the national lawn and then go take a look at the Capitol. The current administration has made it pretty clear that they're not going to stand for that. And but Trump supporters going to volunteer to run down to the Capitol to protest.
But that's the interesting thing. The reason why I say it won't look like what's happening in Venezuela is because people in West Virginia aren't going to go to New York or whatever. Mm-hmm. But you could theoretically see. I mean, we saw January 6th. On one side of the building, you have people rioting, fighting with cops and attacking, police, and people are being attacked. Cops were they like throwing tear gas or whatever, or flashbangs into the crowd, just abject chaos. On the other side, they're marching around like tourists with the doors open by police, having no idea what's going on. So I think in the event of a Kamala Harris victory, or let's be real, we don't even know if it's going to be Kamala, you may see something like January 6th. I mean, we already saw January 6th, but that's not going to be widespread chaos in cities. If Trump wins, I think you get Summer of Love times 10.
Well, you had the Women's March in 2016. The day after the inauguration, we woke up and walked out of the building, and there was the massive Women's March that was relatively peaceful. So it's just a question of how angry they are going to be this time. I mean, there was a lot of rage, but at least it wasn't violent.
I believe.
Yeah, was that when she said she wanted to blow up the White House?
She did make some weird threats that day, yeah. Yeah, it was crazy.
Who was that?
Madonna said,
oh, Madonna.
Yeah. And then she meant that she was saying she wanted to like put them on blast, like
That's right.
Get everyone on Twitter talking about them.
Blow it up with love is what she wanted.
No, but she was like, no, like social media blow up, like when you tweet about somebody and then everyone's tweeting at them, and it's like, yeah, nobody believes that. And then especially with what just happened to Donald Trump, especially with what the Secret Service is saying now, this agent being like, hey, we may see something. I don't know. We're on a powder keg. What I'm hoping for, Trump wins. The cities are in control of what like New York do what New York does. Okay, I'm not going to tell New York what to do. West Virginia, we're going to be fine. There's not going to be any riots here. I'm not worried about that. New York's got to deal with New York problems. But I think Trump may just be like, I'm not going to do anything. There's not going to be an insurrection act. There's not going to be National Guard. I'm not going to get involved. States deal with your own problems. That's not the federal government's problem. And then after a month or two, it dies down. Trump starts taking action, and once again, we get a marginal presidency that we're all kind of like, oh, that's okay, I guess.
Yeah, well, a marginal presidency followed by, touchwood, Pupukanana Hora, 8 years of J.D. Vance, who might have some more transformative elements.
No way. J.D. Vance is going to be, first of all, the idea that we get a Republican Trump and then J.D. Vance wins twice again and we get 12 years, it's very unlikely, because people adapt to their circumstance. So even if things are good, people will, depending on what the sentiment is nationally, you could have a good economy, but if people feel like, let's say in the first 3 years, the economy goes up, and then in the last year, the economy dips a little bit. Now people are feeling like they're losing, you get a shift. So I just don't believe that Trump, Vance, and the Republicans are going to march in with this mandate for leadership and be like, we are overhauling anything. No, they're going to go in and they're going to be like, I'd like to appoint this person. Democrats are going to be like, no, and they'll go, oh.
I don't know. I'm anticipating mass deportations if Trump actually gets in. I mean, and I say mass deportations not in the order of tens of millions, but beginning with objective criteria of criminals or criminality.
I don't believe Trump will be the wrecking ball he's promising.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, but I think
and he's only got 4 years to do it. He's not like he's.
I don't think we see mass deportations. I think we see deportations.
Yeah, okay. You know, the question of mass might be the qualification, but I do think we see deportations. I think we see that, and I think at some point it does get bad enough that even the Democrats will say Trump wasn't all that bad. We're going to maybe go back and revisit 2016 to 2020. It wasn't that disastrous until 2020, and I think other people have roles to play in that. But the nightmare that they fear when they get into the reality won't be as bad as they thought it was, and they might actually see that things will, I don't know, stabilize.
I can see that. I can actually see Trump on Colbert at some point, like a big turnaround, because they're going to be so desperate.
Wasn't he already on Colbert?
Well, yeah, I mean, but that was pre everything,
right?
You know,
when they were trying to.
He was on Fallon. Fallon did the hair thing, and then Fallon got.
Oh, he wasn't on Colbert. It was Fallon.
He might have been on Colbert at some point, but yeah, I see that happening at some point. If he gets elected, and there's it could be a turnaround.
I actually think this is kind of telling because I'm thinking of John Tester's Senate race in Montana, and this is one of these contentious races where they're saying Montana is effectively a red state. It's got
Tester always wins somehow.
Tester always wins, and he held off on endorsing I don't know if I haven't checked today if he's done it, but for a while he wasn't saying anything about Kamala Harris. And so I think you'll see the emergence of a class of Democrats that are sort of more in line with maybe Joe Manchin, who are sort of saying like, we're not like those progressives. Like, we have more shared values. And so then when things get, presumably get better economically under Trump, they are more easily able to say, like, look, I voted for some of those policies. My record isn't like that. I'm thinking of the Democrats who just voted against Kamala Harris in this House resolution on immigration, right? There are people who are starting to say, like, we're parting ways with the Biden-Harris administration. Yep. And so you might see people who posture more moderately and have success with Democratic voters in a way that this progressive wing is starting to see, it just isn't working.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.